is such a long planned, postponed once or twice meeting. I'm so glad. And from both our diaries, I know it's sometimes hard to get us together. So I'm really glad we are. We are in September. We are, I mean, we just had a pre-chat, and we are glad our kids are a little bit more entertained with school and everything, so that we can do also the other things that we love. So maybe let me do a quick intro, and just to say how we know each other, because it's not that we suddenly appeared on this screen, but no, we met at Zinc the first time in the venture builder for the environmental mission, which is now a year ago, because they're now starting the next one.
I know, it's crazy.
It's crazy. It doesn't feel like a year, but that's how obviously you can see and tell. And obviously, I was always
so joyful. It's gone so quickly. That's why.
Yes, no, and it's I always from the day I met with the first pitches, and obviously for those who don't know the Zinc program, the Venture Builder, and obviously Sarah knows it much better. I know it as a fellow, you know it as a founder, and it's such an incredible one, because at the beginning you start finding your partner and who you could actually, who shares the same values and ideas and what you can work on with matching skill sets. And I, you know that from me, but I love the idea that you went with, and you are in the process of sharing exciting news. You've done so many things within those last 12 months together with Varun, and I just love it. And I don't want to, again, take that stage, because that stage is yours, and it will be amazing if you can introduce yourself, because you do so many more things on a daily and weekly and monthly level. And just over to you, Sarah. Who are you, what are you going to do, and what are you up to at the moment?
Oh, thanks so much for the intro. Well, who am I? That's a big existential question, isn't it? But too much for a Monday. But broadly speaking, I have a background in fashion. So I was trained in textile innovation at the Royal College of Art, and then went a fairly windy path via Japan, working for Toyota, designing concept cars, through making $2,000 a pop crystal dildos, a really genuinely windy route into the fashion industry via a giant exhibition that I did at Selfridges, which was down all their Oxford Street windows. And it was actually an installation exhibition, one that I brought from the Design Museum, where I was a resident, to Selfridges. And I'd taken these sculptures, which Selfridges had said, hey, we love them, but we want them to be accessories. So I built these crazy accessories onto mannequins, and then people started asking, where can we buy your jewelry line? So that was a call to a college mate 6 weeks before Fashion Week, and that's how I kicked off my company, which I ran for a bit over a decade, selling accessories and jewelry globally to big luxury stores like Harvey Nichols and Lane Crawford. So I've been in the fashion industry a bit over a decade, but in the last 5 years, really, it's been more focused on transition into sustainability. So I've worked with everything from startups in the fashion tech space to big brands, big retail brands that we'd all know, talking about their sustainable transition, in particular with a focus on materials, and also working with government, looking at legislation, authoring some chapter for a book, and really digging deep into how we can collaborate between all the stakeholders in the supply chain to really improve the way that fashion does business at every stage.
Great. And that's a great, I mean, that's what I mean. There's so many things you do. And I was I looked at your LinkedIn profile, because yes, we know each other, but I thought, okay, well, let's see. I was like, oh my God, there are 5, 6, 7 things that I can spot immediately. And all of them are in a wonderful way interlinked. So your Imperial College mentorship, and obviously then the project with Varun that we know from the Zinc project. So if you pick one, which one is currently the one that you're busy with and you do?
Well, my work with Varun is taking up the most time at the moment. That's my real focus. So Varun, who I met with Zinc VC on the Venture Builder, we became partners during that amazing program. He is not the partner who I would have anticipated coming out with. That's what makes it so magical in lots of ways, I think. The Zinc process really enables you to explore in a way that puts aside perhaps your preconceptions about what a business partner and what a business itself might look like. And I feel excited we've come up with something really special and fresh because we have come at it from a different direction, but with a real shared purpose. So Varun and I both care deeply about climate, first and foremost. He has a previous company that he has worked with, well, he founded, in fact, $1 million company over in India that supports farmers to give them additional revenue streams and reduce waste. So waste is his big bugbear. And meanwhile, for me in the fashion industry, you know, I've had a love affair with this industry since I was 2 years old and first explained to my mom that I absolutely wouldn't wear the clothes she laid out for me, even though I could hardly string a sentence together. I think apparently I made it very clear that I was choosing my own clothes from now on. And I've loved fashion ever since, but it has been a turbulent relationship, particularly in the last few years, you know, as COVID laid bare the supply chains in the fashion industry for us all to see. I think it, you know, really became a turning point for me where I felt like I really had to become part of a transition in the industry rather than part of the problem, making more stuff.
Great. And obviously I know more. I've actually not, I wanted to say tasted it, which you probably could. I never actually tasted it as such, but I touched the fabrics that you're talking about. So do you want to, are you okay to share? I don't know if there's maybe
no, absolutely.
If you can share to those who don't know what it is you're currently working when you say waste and fashion, what does it mean, and what can we see?
I realise I've kept you in suspense there by only semi-answering your question. Excuse me. Yeah, so Varun and I came together with this kind of shared purpose and shared passion. And he was trying to solve the challenge of agricultural waste streams in India, one of which was from banana farms. So I don't know if you know this, but the banana tree only fruits once ever. And you're going to go away and Google that afterwards if you didn't already know that, because you're like, what do you mean ever? That can't be true. But it really is. You grow a banana tree, you chop off the bananas, and then you chop the tree down and burn it or chemically decompose it. And that leads to 0.2 billion tons of GHG emissions annually. And I say 0.2, it might be 0.3. Now you've put me on the spot, I can't remember. But anyway, a shed load of emissions annually just from burning this material, which contains enough fiber to make fabric material, to go to the moon and back 10 times every year. And we're just burning that, creating huge emissions when we could be using this waste stream to create fiber. And then that fiber turns into fabrics that we could use in the fashion industry. And fashion has a real problem at the moment because it is massively exceeding all of its targets around emissions, not just with carbon, but in terms of water use, toxin use, and regulations within the fashion industry are moving from voluntary to mandatory, which means that brands are really stuck. They really have to act fast and make big changes, not incremental changes. We know that 61% of the challenge in hitting CO2 targets in the fashion industry is within what they call upstream processes. That's basically materials, the fibers, where they come from, and then how they're processed, how the materials are made. And without new solutions, the fashion industry really is literally unable to meet targets, mandatory targets within the fashion industry around carbon and other emissions, which leaves it really at risk. The Competitions and Markets Authority has really clamped down recently on greenwashing around the fashion industry. There's new legislation coming in Europe around digital product passports, which will help us transparently track people's supply chains, and the New York Fashion Act, which is going through its procedures at the moment, but it looks like that is going to be fining 1 to 2% of annual revenue for companies who don't meet emissions targets. And that is huge. That is game changing. So we've got a brilliant waste source. We've got brands who desperately, and I quote when I say desperately, desperately needs new solutions in order to reduce their environmental impact. And what Varun and I are doing are solving those problems in the middle, which we spent months at Zinc pinpointing and researching, traveling back between here and India. We know what these problems are and we know how to solve them, and that's what we're doing together.
Amazing. That's amazing, because it's essentially the what I meant earlier. Also, I touched the fabrics and I touched the different variations that you, as a sample, created. And that's the I haven't seen a white one. I've seen different fabrics, thin, thick, all of that, and I was like, this is just brilliant. And I know there was a lot of stuff in the making, in the comment. Do you maybe just nice? Yeah, exactly. I love it. I just really love it. I mean, there's also the question, why doesn't it already exist? Right? So it's like one of those, like, hang on.
When you say banana fiber, you're thinking something kind of hempy and rough, right?
Yeah.
That you can see that's not what we're talking about here. And what we're talking about is fine fibers and fine yarns that you can make a shirt of. You wouldn't know it wasn't cotton.
That's great. Do you see a difference in terms of, because you mentioned the challenges that the industry has and the different brands have? Do you see a different how different brands approach tackle that problem at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, enormously. I think there's an inherent difference between smaller and larger brands and newer and older brands. Now, this is obviously not across the board, but generally speaking, small and newer brands are able to be more agile. And they're able to change in response to the market, which is really demanding increases in sustainability at the moment. And also, they're able to keep track more easily of their supply chains, which is a big problem for larger brands. So if you're small and new and agile, then you might have set up your whole business model around being transparent, because that's something that's very much on the landscape and on the radar at the moment. Whereas for many of these very big established brands, they have supply chains which, for one pair of shoes might involve, 60 different partners and 60 different flights. And that would not be unusual. And it's very standard for the fashion industry to have middlemen set up. So between the brand and the supply chain, there are middlemen that kind of manage this externally. And what that means is the supply chains are really opaque. Brands really don't know what's going on most of the time, particularly big brands. And sometimes this has been set up intentionally, having middlemen so that it's a kind of, plausible deniability about bad stuff going on in the fashion supply chain. But also it's just the nature of the fashion industry. It has been driven on price for so many years, and getting the best price has meant that you will shift your production round the world for just a button or a shoelace. And what that's meant is we are getting production all over the world, and the supply chains are so complex you can't even imagine the tangled spider web.
Wow.
And so for large brands, even beginning to sort of map that supply chain and understand where the problems lie so that they know where to tackle first, where to make the biggest difference, where the biggest problems actually are, that's the first challenge. So for those big brands, we're a long way from solving it. We're actually just at sort of identification part for the most part at the moment.
Interesting. And I guess that's what I see from other industries as well, right? So there's when you say new versus old and established versus the new kids on the block, I guess there's this challenge that the established ones have, because it's the status quo, and it was always like that. So why would you change it? So it works, right? Kind of like it's a running system, kind of works. But
yeah, but I think yes, it's worked for them as businesses, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the world. It doesn't work with sustainability. It's not a long-term solution. And I think in the fashion industry particularly, but you can also really extend this out to look at fast consumption generally. As a society, our need for newness and our desire for the latest thing, our ability to buy things and get things delivered really quickly. All of that is amazing. It's phenomenal. If you look at the opportunities that we have been given, and I think, there's this horrible tension where we're like, we've advanced a lot as a society in terms of giving people choice and opportunity and excitement around fashion and around lots of other kinds of products too. But it's come at a cost, a huge cost, which we haven't mapped for, and we haven't put any mitigation in process for. And if you look at when I'm talking about large brands, let's talk about a large brand, a luxury brand compared with fast fashion. Now, luxury brands are not doing it perfectly. They don't have perfectly mapped supply chains either. But they are at least, in the most part, built around this idea of heritage and looking after product and value. And actually, often with those luxury brands, you'll buy a bag and those bags will increase in value as they go on, as they become vintage pieces. That's very different to this fast fashion approach, which really has only been with us in the recent decade or two. This is very new, this idea of capitalizing on a model that is distinctly designed to waste. And that is absolutely unsustainable in every sense. And I think from my perspective, whilst we can transition those big brands into ways of working more ethically and helping with their supply chains, the fast fashion model as we currently know it has to die. It's as simple as that. And when I say it has to die, I say as we know it. I want to specify that because I think there are two options here. Either consumers buy less and wear things more times and don't get the new outfit every Friday night, or, and this is crucial, and I think a point that's neglected a lot in conversations in the landscape here, or if we're going to enable fast fashion, then we need to do that by using materials appropriately. And that means not using plastic-based materials that last for hundreds of thousands of years for things that we're going to wear once and dump. And so there needs to be big innovation, not only around our business models, but also around the kinds of materials that we use. So if we want to have newness all the time, then we can rent items, we can do resale, we can look at the secondhand market, which is growing exponentially. We could also make things that would biodegrade as you wore them that evening, changing form. We're looking at really futuristic ideas here at the leading edge of the industry in order to solve these challenges, because our relationship with fashion and newness and self-expression is one that is deeply ingrained. And I think the idea that we just suggest that we reduce consumption, certainly in the very short term, it's a great goal to have. And if we can incrementally reduce it, that would be fantastic. But I don't think we're going to solve this just through that alone. In fact, I know we're not.
I love the headline that you gave with fast fashion industry has to die, and then those two examples, because and obviously you're the expert in that, because there's so many things around there, which is the hiring and the obviously secondhand or pre-loved clothing and stuff like that. And then the fabrics, which is where you come in, which are obviously biodegradable, or have a second use. And then I also heard you talk about those different relationships and people, and I wonder, and that's the part where I'm always curious to know more. How do you work with those different stakeholders, be it on the customer side or on the partner side or on the government, which is another obviously important one? How do you, what's your approach to stakeholders, and how do you collaborate or work on a solution and innovative approach?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important question, because for so long, what we would call the sort of bottom end of the supply chain, farmers who are producing crops for fiber, and manufacturers, usually in the global south, have not been part of the conversations within fashion about what needs to change. And that's wrong on so many levels, not least because the climate impact we're having here in the West excuse me, is disproportionately affecting the global south. So it's those people that are going to feel the impacts which largely we are creating. And so having conversations with those people in the supply chain is essential. I feel Like, I'm having those conversations for real for the first time ever since I started working with Varun. And it's been a real privilege because it's opened up doors to have real conversations with people from a completely different geography, a different context. And the reality is that when you do that, there often has to be a kind of a translator in the middle, whether that's a language translator or actually just someone to translate ideas and understanding and history. And I felt incredibly privileged when I've been to India with Varun, and we actually had a conversation at the beginning, which I'll share with you, when we first decided we were going to, be founders together. And we decided we were going to share all of the biggest fears we had about being founders together and anything we thought might get in the way. And one of my key fears, which I shared with him, was that I was worried that we had come from such different backgrounds, and everything from the way we did business to the days of the week we worked to our understanding of culture and heritage and religion and all of those things made us so different that doing business together might be really hard. And my particular fear actually was that in times of high pressure, where, the shit's hitting the fan and you are really down to the wire, that we wouldn't have the instant understanding of each other to be able to move forward. And I was particularly worried that I might offend him. I would say that I am at times, I can be brash and quick and jokey and offensive and loud, and I was concerned that that could cause upset actually either way, and that I might not be as effective as I could be as a leader, because I would be worried that I would be watching myself, and I was worried that he might be offended or he might be watching himself too.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had this entire discussion, and we came up with something that we wrote and signed, which we called the Candid Kind Agreement, where if ever we had a misunderstanding between us, then we would bring it to the table candidly and immediately, but with a kindness and an assumption that nothing had been said intentionally, and that we would assume that there had been a cultural misunderstanding or some kind of misunderstanding between us, and that we would educate each other. Because I think I certainly have known in the last few years, particularly with the rise of Black Lives Matter and other really important movements which have tackled sensitive topics, that often I haven't known quite which way to turn or what to say. I've wanted to learn, I've wanted to move forward and make progress, but I have been concerned that I might offend in trying to do so. And the agreement that Varun and I have is a very generous agreement on his part for me to be able to ask whatever questions I want, and for me to be able to talk about whatever is on my mind. And he, of course, can too, but I realize that this might actually benefit me more in this particular scenario, so that we can really, really learn to work together and recognize each other as well as the partners we're working with properly, on a humanitarian level as well as on a business level. And as we've driven through villages in India together, I've asked questions about what's going on around us, about everything from class systems to poverty to the entire economic, religious, cultural systems that make up what we're doing. And I think that's at the root of why we are going to be successful at bridging this supply chain, because ultimately the challenge that we have here, and the reason why no one has managed to scale a project like this effectively as a genuine replacement of damaging materials for the fashion industry, is that no one has managed to connect the dots across the whole of the supply chain. So
cultural dots.
Absolutely. And there are opportunities for increased efficiency, operations, which Varun has an amazing background in delivering these kinds of projects across India. Meanwhile, there are challenges within the material matrices in the fashion industry, which are very complex, and I understand and have those relationships. But really, it's understanding how to bring those together with all of the stakeholders and bridge those cultural gaps in order to really be productive, because actually good business comes from an individual human level.
Yep.
So I realized that might have been, a more
That's great.
broad and expansive answer. We're dealing with stakeholders from everyone through to the farmer to the British government. And between us, we need to be able to have conversations appropriately and within context of all of those people. And so for Varun and I, the fact that we come from very different places makes it tricky at times for us. And that's something we put a huge amount of energy into making sure we communicate clearly and understand each other. But it's also what enables us to do what we do brilliantly.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, I love the example that you signed, as like came up and then signed this wonderful agreement. And that's a really good tip. And that's the reason why I love having those conversations with you and people like you, just to help learn from this, because we're all probably solving some other topics in another area, but these are the wonderful tips and snippets that we can share.
It's been invaluable. We've really pissed each other off a number of times, and turning to this has proved one of the most important things we've done.
Nice. Oh, amazing. So, but then also, because I know, because we had a pre-chat, that there's some things potentially happening, and I know you can't say all about it, but is there something, and I know you do this, so is there something that you in terms of partnerships and things are coming up that you would like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Funny you say that, Andrea. Absolutely. Well, I know that we've talked about this. I've been talking to you about this for weeks now, and I'm super excited. But this is the first place I'm actually announcing it, that we have a collaboration coming up for London Fashion Week next week. I can't say who it's with yet, but what I can tell you is that it's one of my absolute favorite sustainability focused designers on a global stage at London Fashion Week. Not just one of my favorite designers, actually one of Anna Wintour, the editor of American Vogue, one of her favorite designers.
Now you let people Google it.
Yeah, let's see who they think it is now. Play a fun quiz game. We are so excited to be launching fabrics on the runway with this particular designer. And along with us having our fabrics there, which is for us as a startup, proving that we are feasible for the industry, we can operate at this scale
within we're not even talking a year, right? So like that's not when you started it. That's
within 9 months,
7, 9.
Months.
I mean that's.
You've hardly slept. Let's be clear, but.
That's like wow, and well done, congratulations. I mean that's already like huge.
Well, thank you, but time is of the essence. We're solving these big, super wicked problems around climate crisis, and there isn't time to spare. We're not going to hang around here. So that feels really exciting. We're also just opening a funding round, which is for 350,000, which is going to enable us to develop our further partnerships with brands in order to, firstly, to be able to demonstrate more broadly that we can scale up this idea and that we can meet market fit for brands, and that essentially that feedback loop that we have by having great relationships with brands is effective. Also to support research that we are doing with the University of Leeds around different finishing products for materials, including our own, but also that could be applicable to other natural fibers as well, which would hugely reduce the impact of carbon, but also water and toxin use in the fashion industry if we could nail this. So we're working with absolutely world leading experts, which is so exciting. So part of our funds is going to be placed around developing these processes, which hopefully will bring us some IP as well. And then thirdly, driving those kind of big partnerships going forwards that can help us as a brand to really launch onto the market next year in a big way. So we're busy scaling our supply chain, which is a very unique but fascinating decentralized supply chain over in India. but also wanting to work here with, fashion brands that are aligned with our mission. So I know I've mentioned it to you before, but Stella McCartney is always a brand that I have admired for their dedication to the sustainable space. They invest hugely in new innovation, and importantly, they understand what the innovation landscape looks like. Because innovation is tricky, it's time consuming, it's unpredictable. That's the excitement of it. And solving those challenges is what is going to make the difference in the upcoming decade. And they're the challenges that need solving right now, but we need brands who are brave enough. So yeah, I'm excited that we've had an early conversation there, but certainly I'm looking for brand partners who are going to be in line with our mission and who are going to want to help us drive this, from a financial perspective, but also from a feedback perspective. We need to get this right. Time is a ticking, and we believe we can achieve an exact market fit for the fashion industry, and that's where other brands have fallen down so far. So if we can do that, then we can really enable change at scale, and that's certainly our ambition in the future.
I love that, and I love that call that you're now announcing, obviously the not just the investor round, which I think definitely, based on just that example that you just giving with the Fashion Week, like that's just a wonderful, amazing, incredible case or business case, right? So like, and then the call for brands to be early, because I guess again that's also from other areas of other industries. There's a benefit for companies as in big brands working with a startup like you, because there's this wonderful innovation process and still feedback round, which is not true because the processes are still in development and you're still agile to get things done. And
absolutely. I mean, working closely with brands enables us to get things right for them, literally in a way that's completely bespoke, which is exciting for us as well as for the brand. I think the other thing that runs alongside that is that this is such a complex, tricky landscape that we're not just talking about developing materials, we're talking about an entire new generation of legal policy that goes around this. And brands are put in a really tricky position here. They often don't have someone in-house to deal with this. And if they do, it's usually a small team. So actually having people at the forefront of legislation and understanding what that moving landscape looks like, and then sort of bringing new product opportunities to the table with that in mind, I think it's a really exciting opportunity for brands to not only get products that are exactly right for them first and possibly exclusively, but also to have the right plan for a future fit brand, because we know categorically, without doubt, that brands that are not planning for the new future and sustainability that we have are going to fall away. It's as simple as that. And so working with startups who are right at the forefront of this landscape, who understand what it's going to look like, it puts big brands in the absolute best position to safeguard and reduce risk for the future.
Yeah, amazing. I was a fan from day one and a total supporter. So I think usually I ask for words of wisdom, but you already gave so many things and so many tips. So I think this is the final question to you. Is there any advice, any words of wisdom that you want to share or leave the audience with before we make a note on Fashion Week?
Oh, that's a tricky one. What would be my most important?
Maybe someone else, maybe a shout out to someone who gave you a really good advice once and you're like, gosh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I could pause this for 10 seconds and gather my thoughts, because I somehow didn't see this final question coming.
Oh, good.
I think that, well, I'm gonna say something that relates very personally to me as a 40-year-old woman in big industry, and that is that as I have reached this point in my career, and my career, if you look at my LinkedIn, has been a windy old route. this is the first time in my career where I have seen all those bits come together in a way that I finally understand what I was driving at. And then I never really knew what I was driving at. I just followed things that instinctively felt right and good and interesting. And I know that that doesn't sound like the way that most, I don't know, most design your life strategies would have you do it, right? They'd have you strategize it all from an early stage. And I think that there is great merit in sitting down and knowing where you're going and talking that through with mentors. And I wish I'd done that more in my early days. But I also don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. That what I did was followed my gut a lot of the time. And I questioned it all the way through. And now that I've hit this point where the things in my career have come together, I really feel satisfied about trusting my gut. And I read something recently which really sort of cemented that for me, which was that your gut feeling isn't this. I always saw it as trusting my gut was somehow trusting this unpredictable whim or sense that I might have. And if you explore what your gut feeling actually is, it is your body's fascinatingly clever way of consolidating information and experiences over all the years you've lived and giving you an immediate response reaction based upon decades of data that you have assimilated. And when you put it like that, you realize that trusting your gut isn't some kind of flippant way to go. You realize that trusting your gut is a smart way to go. And that what you do is you trust your gut and then you back it up, right, with immediate thinking and proof and what have you. But this idea that the gut is a data source as opposed to kind of something flippant that you turn to really impacted me and has certainly given me confidence to move forward with that trust of myself. And I mentioned a moment ago, Designing Your Life. I'm going to finish with mentioning that that was a book that actually really helped me maybe 3 or 4 years ago as I reached this point in my life, in my career, where I was trying to balance lots of things, both personally and professionally, and trying to work out what it was I wanted going forward. I felt instinctively like I built these good building blocks, but that I didn't know what to do with them. And I worked with a really amazing friend of mine, Alyssa Gray, on developing. We both were at this point in our lives, and we used this framework, which is in a book called Design Your Life, which we worked on together to design what we wanted our futures to look like. And for me, that was a real turning point in moving into what I think is going to be not only the best phase of my career, but also, and partly in consequence, the best phase of my life.
Amazing. And that's great. And I mean, to be honest, I have another project for young adults and helping young adults to, as an early start of their career. So I think that's, there's so many wonderful links that you just shared, which, yeah, I'm trying to do that in another project. I think there's, yeah.
The other book I'm going to throw out there while I'm here is there's a book called The One Thing. I mean, it was a New York Times bestseller, like lots of people are familiar with it, but I found that book fantastic. Definitely one of those books where when I got to the end and I realized I'd made like notes on every page, I'm like, well, notes sort of become a bit useless when you've like literally written the book. But yeah, I found that one fantastic too. Great. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Insightful. Every time I learn something new from you. So thank you. And I'm so excited for next week for you. And yeah, it's in the diary. And then yeah, we'll stay in touch.
I'll share some pictures and images once everything goes live. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you again soon. And I really hope that I'll get to meet some of your connections and viewers and some of your network based on this conversation we've had. I'd love to meet some more people who you know.
Perfect. Yeah, likewise. We'll connect. That's what we're here for.
Great. Yeah.
See you soon. And yeah, we'll make a note.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.